First Olympic champion Grant Hackett's fall from grace is well known, but could his arrest and apparent mental breakdown just weeks ago be his biggest and final wake-up call? Tonight, our exclusive interview with a man who appears to be facing his demons head-on.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And when you're about to face your demons, would Nine's A Current Affair be your interview of choice? Indeed, if your personal breakdown had been followed relentlessly by the tabloids, as Hackett's has been, would you be offering anyone a TV exclusive? Well, of course, the answer is no.
Hey, Grant, the whole of Australia is rallying behind you.
Thanks.
Yes, ACA's Face to Face, which it plugged breathlessly last week as
an exclusive with Grant Hackett as he leaves the country on a mission to finally get his mind and his life back on track,
was more like an ambush as he checked in for his flight at Brisbane Airport. And ACA's exclusive interview with the remarkably cooperative swimming star ran just 45 seconds. Yes, 45 seconds.
How are you doing, mate?
Oh yeah, coming along. Like I said, it's a time for privacy to focus on myself and make some steps forward. But yeah, I've been very, very fortunate to receive overwhelming support from the public, which has made this process that's very difficult a lot easier. So yeah, very, very appreciative of that. It's been quite amazing for myself and my family.
That's about half the interview, and Grant Hackett didn't stop once as he headed for the departure gate. But ACA still managed to milk the moment and turn it into a 5-minute report by recapping Grant's public downfall and then by playing the interview twice. So, how did Nine's viewers react? Not well, to judge by the comments on Facebook.
Shame on you, ACA. There is no exclusive interview. You have ambushed him at the airport.
Isn't this called stalking? You idiots are pathetic.
Did you hear him, ACA? A time for privacy. Leave the bloke alone.
But there's fat chance of that. And when Hackett got off the plane in LA 14 hours later, he had to run the gauntlet with Nine again. To his great credit, he handled it with gold medal class. But now, to kids with learning difficulties, and a programme that Today Tonight, the ABC and others in the media are keen to tell us will change those children's lives.
It's incredible, really.
I can see he's got a future now. He didn't have one before.
It's the controversial program transforming the minds and lives of children with learning disorders.
I literally get goosebumps every day at seeing some of the things that the students achieve.
Last month, the designer of what Today Tonight recognised is a controversial programme, Canadian Barbara Arrowsmith-Young, was in Australia for a speaking tour, and she was met with a tsunami of adoring media coverage.
This is such an exciting story.
It's a beautiful story. It's a wonderful story. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
Barbara Arrowsmith-Young has written an international bestseller about her struggle to overcome learning difficulties called The Woman Who Changed Her Brain. And for 35 years, she's been trying to help others do the same, with a program that's now being used in schools in Canada, the US, Asia and Australia.
Here in Australia, the Arrowsmith program is now taught, in 21 schools?
23 here in Australia
23 in Australia now. Incredible. How does the program work?
Well, the problem is there's no conclusive evidence that it does work, that is. To be sure, there's plenty of parents who believe in it, but there's also plenty of highly qualified critics. In 2015, Oxford University's Professor Dorothy Bishop warned,
Arrowsmith lacks any scientific evidence for efficacy and has attracted criticism from mainstream experts in children's learning difficulties.
Also in 2015, La Trobe University's Professor Pamela Snow levelled that charge and questioned why the Arrowsmith program was being introduced to some Victorian schools.
To the best of my knowledge, the evidence in support of Arrowsmith comprises in-house research reports, conference poster presentations, and satisfied client testimonials. Yet it has been charging parents thousands of dollars over 3 decades in the absence of robust, independent, empirical data.
And last month, only days before Arrowsmith's adoring Australian interviews, a Canadian Human Rights Tribunal examining her program concluded,
there is no scientifically rigorous, objective evidence that supports its efficacy, according to the evidence presented to the tribunal.
So, cue some tough questions from the media when she touched down in Australia, wouldn't you think? And in Adelaide, she got some, from local radio hosts like Jade Robran on 5AA.
There has been some critics. Dyslexic South Australia has labelled the program neurobolics, they said, with insufficient independent peer-reviewed research.
And on ABC Adelaide, Ali Clark got her to respond to the same pithy comment.
I would actually welcome people to go onto our website and look at the research that's been done. We have a number of studies that are independent.
And are they peer-reviewed?
Those ones that were done independently, they were peer-reviewed in the sense that they were presented at the American Psychological Association Convention and the Canadian Psychological Association Convention.
But nowhere else in Australia, and certainly not on the ABC, in 5 other interviews, was a word raised in doubt. Not on ABC News Breakfast.
Now, our next guest on the program this morning is a pioneer in neuroplasticity.
Barbara Arrowsmith-Young has helped hundreds of thousands of children and adults overcome learning problems through an education program she designed.
Not on ABC Perth.
He's called you the Helen Keller of neuroplasticity. Is that... How do you feel about that?
And not on ABC Melbourne.
Barbara, your suffering has been put to good use.
So, is that good enough? Well, no. Given that the promise of help will spark hope for parents of children with learning difficulties, we reckon the media needs to ask whether Arrowsmith-Young's controversial program does actually work. And 90% of the media failed to do that job. And now to a story involving Islam that Fairfax and parts of the ABC again failed to cover. And we're talking about the drama at Sydney's Punchbowl Boys High.
Police in unmarked cars were this morning keeping the peace outside a school in crisis. In the last week, the principal of Punchbowl Boys High, Chris Griffiths, was sacked. Now his replacement, Robert Petruno, has been subjected to violent threats. We're going to get you. We're going to you up, you dog.
Last Thursday's Channel 9 News wasn't the only one to cover events at the troubled Western Sydney High School, after the principal was...
stood down amid allegations that he refused to implement government de-radicalisation programs.
And the story had already been big news in the Daily Telegraph for days.
Hardline principal's school is off rails.
This is a school, not a mosque.
It had also made national headlines in The Australian, which had broken the story a week before.
High school leadership dumped.
19 schools in New South Wales anti-extremist project as principal threatened.
And in the meantime, on Radio 2GB, former ABC boss Mark Scott, who now runs New South Wales Education, had admitted to Ray Hadley that there was a problem.
But things seem to have gone off the rails a bit there, hence the change.
Would that be about the time the principal converted to Islam?
I don't know when he converted to Islam. And I think that we've got to be pretty careful about this as well, Ray. I mean, there are lots of people who hold different religious views.
Yeah, but they don't shove them down the throat of children.
Yes, and again, got to be careful about what's substantiated and not substantiated. But the one thing we know for sure...
Well, something must have been substantiated, Mark, because you got rid of him out of the place pretty quickly.
So, this is a story you'd expect the Sydney media to be all over. Radicalisation of young Muslims is a serious issue, especially since Curtis Cheng was gunned down outside Parramatta Police Station by a 15-year-old schoolboy. And it appears to have been one of the key concerns at Punchbowl Boys High, which has a large proportion of Muslim students, and was becoming isolated from the community. But, remarkably, it did not make the ABC's 7pm news. And on ABC Radio Sydney, where hours of programming was available, 10 days in a row, there was nothing. Not on The Breakfast Show, not on The Morning Show, and not on Drive. So why would Sydney's second most popular talk station ignore it? We asked ABC Sydney, and they told us they attempted to follow up the story, but...
There were a number of claims that were difficult to substantiate, and in this case we treated the story with caution so as to make sure we upheld the high standards of accuracy which our audience expects.
What about asking former ABC boss Mark Scott to come on? The story did finally get on the breakfast program this morning, and it was previously covered online and briefly in radio news. But the Sydney Morning Herald still hasn't mentioned it at all. And why is that? They told us they've written extensively about radicalisation before, and they added,
"We make calls on what and when we will cover stories, and aren't influenced by what other media are doing. To suggest that there was any self-censoring for any reason is a nonsense."
Or, as managing editor Stuart Washington told a reader who asked why the Herald didn't cover Kazar Trad's recent defence of wife-beating,
"Thankfully, the Herald's news agenda is not set by Andrew Bolt or Paul Barry."
Ouch. And finally, to what could have turned into a riot on the streets of Melbourne. Or so we were told by Fairfax Media and 7 and 9 News.
Rival extremist groups have clashed outside the Melbourne Magistrates Court over the appearance of the controversial leader of the United Patriots Front.
Large numbers of police were outside the Melbourne Magistrates Court as supporters of the trio faced off with anti-racism demonstrators.
The anti-racism protesters outside court had a familiar battle cry, while supporters of the three accused included a knight, a soldier, a capped man with a borrowed slogan and a vocal group of flag bearers.
But hang on a moment and let's take a closer look at what those supposed supporters of the United Patriots Front were wearing. Because those aren't actually genuine Australian flags. And nor are those genuine UPF supporters. That so-called triple flag is a trademark of the Million Flag Patriots, which is a satirical group that describes itself as
the most prestigious, unbashable and patrioty neo-patriot group in Australia.
And that's something 7, 9 and Fairfax Media could surely have picked up on from this speech outside the court. Didn't quite catch that in Fairfax Media's version. Luckily, the Million Flag Patriots shot their own video, complete with graphics.
Black Cottrell is a puffy sociopath who lives with his mother and enunciates everything incorrectly. He is a shit.
And if that Pythonesque outburst weren't enough of a clue, the MFP's Clancy Henson, not his real name, claims they made it clear to the media they were only a joke.
We did say we were satire. They were filming for the whole time. The cameraman was laughing. Just situationally, it was clear we weren't real. We were standing next to left-wing protesters with no protest between us.
And to cap it all, had 9, 7 or Fairfax bothered to do a quick search on Million Flag Patriots, they could have found videos like this.
Come to the Children's Flag Burning Family Day Barbecue, organised by the Million Flag Patriots.
Yep, it's certainly wacky stuff. But how could you be fooled? Especially when Melbourne's Herald Sun had no trouble reporting it right. Clancy Hanson's theory is the media knew, but still went ahead.
I believe they deliberately packaged us as being racist anyway. They did that because it made for an easier presentation.
And of course, a much better story, with the threat of conflict. But 9 and 7 both told us that is not true, and it was cock-up rather than conspiracy. 7's reporter was apparently inside the court, while its camera crew was outside filming. Fairfax Media did put a note on the story to say the Patriots might be parody, but they clearly forgot to warn the person making the video. And finally, if you haven't already seen it, and I know it has been everywhere, have a laugh at this, as a BBC Live interview with Professor Robert E. Kelly is interrupted by, well, wait and see.
Scandals happen all the time. The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
And what will it mean for the wider region? I think one of your children has just walked in. I mean, shifting sands in the region. Do you think relations with the North may change?
I would be surprised if they do. Pardon me.
That's right.
My apologies.
What's this going to mean for the region?
My apologies. South Korea's policy.
Priceless, isn't it? And you can read more about tonight's stories on our Facebook page or our website, where you can get a transcript, find statements from 7, Fairfax and the ABC, and download the programme. You can also catch up with us on iView and contact me or Media Watch on Twitter. And don't miss Media Bites every Thursday on Facebook, Twitter and our website, and also on iView. But for now, until next week, that's all from us. Goodbye.